Hey everybody, welcome to this video on what I consider to be one of the least talked about and most important challenges to look at if you're a job seeker, which is namely, how do you deal with the stigma of being unemployed? For those of you who are listening who have been out of a job for over 6 months, you absolutely fall into this category. And for some of you who have yet to reach that 6 month period, but are working in an industry where it's very, very uncommon to be between jobs, you may not be at that 6 month juncture. You might be at the 3 month juncture and be feeling this pressure. And there are people out there in hiring who will look you in the face and say, "What are you talking about? It's totally natural to be out of work. It's not going to affect your chances negatively one bit." In my experience, as a career coach, as someone who works with job seekers each and every day and sees it play out, that has not been my experience. In my experience, there is a big difference between how an employer sees you, deals with you, and operates with you all the way through every stage of the hiring process when they know that you're in play, when they know that there's momentum and charge and that you're already engaged in things, versus when they know they have you. Typically, it is not uncommon to see in the latter, hiring times stretch out, offers be what we would consider to be lowball. There's a whole bunch of things that show up simply because, for some unscrupulous employers, they know that they can push that, right? I mean, because what option do you have? You're not in the market. You're just a job seeker. So I want to show you ways in which you can really defeat that, ways in which you can really either eliminate it entirely, the stigma that comes along with being out of work for a certain period of time, or at the very, very least, greatly reduce it. And I want to just share what I've observed and what I've taught my clients over the years that have worked the best over time. Okay. So I guess step one, we've already broached it, which is don't keep your head in the sand. Okay, if you're in between work and you got that looming gap in your resume, for example, no, stop ignoring it, because I guarantee you that little leap in logic you make every time you look at that resume and you don't do anything about that, every single person, especially people who are coming in cold, especially if you're primarily using job postings and the like to come in cold at companies. There are better ways to do it, but if that's what you're doing, that first impression is going to be based on your resume, right? If I have dialogue going with someone, it's different. If the resume gets involved, fine, maybe I can explain it off, I can do that. But if you're coming in cold, you got to address this thing, okay? So number one, acknowledge that this is an issue and you got to get ahead of it. You can't be behind. You can't be waiting. Number one, your phone will not ring with interviews. And number two, if you're in the interview room and you're broaching it in that interview room, you've lost the issue, okay? Because that is the most passive approach that you can take, and you're going to pay the steepest penalty by ignoring. So number one, we are going to acknowledge the issue, acknowledge that this is something that we need to get ahead of and something that we need to address. Okay, number two, own the gap period. So starting with your resume, okay? If we're talking a 6 month gap, a longer gap, what I would do is within the professional experience section, like let's say I have a gap for 8 months, okay, right now. So what I'm going to do is, let's say my last job was at ADP, okay. I'm going to add like about just 2 lines, don't overdo it, addressing that period. And here is what I think are the most effective ways to address that. For most of my executive clients, almost without exception, the best approach is to put in something like independent consulting, role, consultant, subject matter expert in, the 2 or 3 big domains that you specialize in. By the way, if you're not thinking like that, you absolutely should be, in terms of how you're branding yourself. It's not about fitting a job posting, it's about addressing pain. So you could set up that, and then you could have a line or two that just, something along the lines of using deep experience within the healthcare sector towards standalone contract projects, right? Something like that, right? You're not going deeply into it, but you're just addressing the fact that you're pursuing it. You don't have to go into more detail than that. Now, for many of you, you could be saying right now, saying, look, Anish, that's not my case. I'm not looking for consulting work. I'm looking for full-time work. Fine. But just between me and you, as someone who can tell you things that other people in hiring have their hands bound and aren't willing to tell you because it's not in their interest to do so, let me be real with you, okay? The difference between what you're doing as a job seeker and what you're doing as a consultant is it's words. It's nothing, really. It's exactly the same. You should still be looking to cultivate high-level relationships. You should still be looking to add value and apply your knowledge to see if you can solve a problem or suss out pain. You should still be looking for opportunities. It's just that for some, that's going to end in a full-time role. For some, it's going to mean getting the inside track for an open role, a job posting role. For some, it's going to be something else. We're quibbling about the outcome. But in terms of how you go about getting it, it's almost exactly the same. So if you've been on a bunch of interviews over these last couple of months, tell me what the difference is exactly between saying, yeah, during that period, I was looking for, ideally, my ideal outcome would be, let's say, chief marketing officer of a company where I can make that impact. But I have been chatting with, insert a company you interviewed for, insert a company you interviewed for, to pursue other opportunities, including consulting roles. So it's definitely something I'm getting my feet wet in. Yeah, it's something I have my eye on right now. Moving to the next thing, right? So you can absolutely use something like that if you've been on the job hunt, right? And it's good to think about it in this way because, hey, by the way, have you seriously been thinking about consulting stuff? When I started out in this business as a career coach, I didn't know anything about client intake or working with someone or marketing myself or building strategic alliances within the industry or any of that stuff, right? I had a desire to help people and make a change. So if you have that, or if you know that there's a big change in your industry that you specialize in making, trust me, you have enough to stand on your own 2 feet. So consider this also a wake-up call to see whether adding that to your job search strategy is something to think about. Either way, you're gonna own that gap, right? So you could use the consulting route. You could use, if you don't feel comfortable with something like that, you could use something called like a career note, which basically says, which accounts for the time, managed family responsibilities and undertook training in X, Y, and Z. Look, that's not going to be as strong of an approach as something like consulting. Or what some people have even done is if they're exploring their own little business idea, they make any progress on that, hey, come on, put that in there in development. It doesn't have to be a launched product, right? But it helps account for the time in that kind of active sense. That's the best because it gives you momentum. It gives you a sense that this person is in play regardless of whether we're able to hash it out. That's a very, 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 very powerful motivator for everyone in hiring and elsewhere. So that to me would be path one I would always sort of look at to see if we can pull that off. But if not, then adding something like a career note, which accounts for the time. And hey, if you've legitimately, let's say you've been out of the country for 4 out of those 8 months, right, on something, you can use that. You can address it. That'll still minimize the impact of that gap and that perception. By the way, when it comes to things like LinkedIn and your resume, do not include any verbiage whatsoever that has like, currently looking for roles related to, currently open for roles. We're trying to get people to insinuate that, okay? But to address it like that lowers your leverage right from the get-go, okay? You're not a desperate job seeker. I want you to think as if you've always had and now have a slate of 12 to 15 opportunities in front of you that you haven't said yes to. How would you address the path ahead? How would you address your brand, right? How would you look at this? Get into that mode. Fake it till you make it is a very real thing, and it is never going to help you more than right now, because I'm sure there are periods where you felt like a failure. You felt like you've been off the beaten course. God knows, I've felt that. I've been between things like that, and I know the mental head games it can play, but none of that can go out there. So stop tipping your hand in that way, because it's not even going to help you. So another tip. So creating a sense of momentum, right? We've been talking about this. Anything you could do in terms of volunteer work. I spoke about if you've got a startup, create a little LLC, list the LLC, and list the what you're doing to develop that, and have it within the resume to account for the gap. even LinkedIn Learning. You can take a course there and update, at the end, if you're like, oh, you feel comfortable sharing this on your profile, add it to your profile. If it's, for example, if I'm working in an industry where they're just looking at kind of the road ahead in, let's say, software as a service, like in data analytics, for example, right? And I don't need to be a specialist in that, but it's a value add. I take a LinkedIn Learning course, add that to my profile. When people are checking out my profile anyway, as they're getting to know me, right? In the job search context, boom, that's a conversation point. And I know multiple times, I've been chatting with recruiters and people in HR, and they've said to me that, yes, something that a course someone took on that profile made me go, oh yeah, we'd have a naturally entry point to talk about that, because I know that's a big priority for the employer that I represent, So these things create a sense of momentum. These things create a sense of build. Any mentoring, any volunteer work, you don't have to invest 30 days out of 30 on this stuff, but now you've got the time anyway. Come on, let's think about impact. Let's think about getting you out there, okay? The worst thing you can do is be locked at home in your office with your own thoughts about how you're failing and screwing this up. Relationships are relationships, and start casting that pool to have that. Finally, the last tip I'm going to leave you with, okay? And this is such a powerful aspect of really defeating this stigma of quote unquote being unemployed, and beneath that being unemployable, right? Which is like the deeper fear. I want you to think about setting a higher target. I want you to think like whatever it is. If you've been looking for the VP director level, I want you to seriously think, what if someone had a gun to my head and I couldn't accept a role at those levels? It had to be SVP level. It had to be and above. If I've been putting off that jump, what do I need to do right now to make that happen? How do I need to step this up? What have I been holding off on? And because ultimately we're all meant to be shooting one step higher than we can go for, okay? That's where we are at our best. That's where we engage with the light and positivity. Whenever you know that you are acting out of desperation and fear, there's bitterness there, right? There's a sense of, yeah, I should be SVP, but you know what? I've been out of work for 7 months, right? We got to take what we can get. Bitterness, right? There's cynicism, right? There's a sense of, how dare they call me in for interview 5 when I already have twice as much experience, right? At every stage you're closing off and you feel embittered, versus the other side, where at every stage you're like, yes, I made that happen. And then you're looking at the next one. You're like, okay, what do I need to do? Do I have them? How hard do I need to push this, right? Yes, there's risk, right? Yes, there's risk that it can fall apart. Guess what, though? There is no security in shooting for something that you know you've already outgrown because you think it's quote unquote safer. It's an error in judgment. You're still gonna have to go through everything, and you can still be passed over. It's just now you're dealing with the premise of overqualified. Employers, they're much more receptive to someone who's shooting one step up. And here's the magic, okay? During times of scarcity in your life, as being between jobs is for almost all of us, right? When you're in that scarcity mode, you can't keep obsessing over the price that's being paid, okay? You can't every day be like, one more day out of work, one more day that I don't have. You're never gonna make it, okay? And if your sights are too limited, that's what's gonna happen, is every day is gonna feel like a siege, because why? What's the best outcome here? You suffer and 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 you suffer, and then you end up in something kind of like what you had before. Ergo, the suffering was worthless, no? The suffering had no point. And you can say, yeah, I gotta look after my family. So do I, man. So do I. I got 3 kids. I have a family, okay? I know that pressure, but that's not enough. So let me challenge you to say that if you commit right now to setting that highest possible target, the one that makes you a little bit uncomfortable, what's going to happen is, yes, the turbulence will be there, but it will instantly be infused with good purpose again. It will be infused with a challenge, because you know that on the other end of that, you're going to end up in a situation that is clearly, obviously better than what you had. And that makes the period being out of work worth it, right? It makes the chaos and the uncertainty, financial, emotional, all of that, worth it. because now you're striving. And if you only have 2 calls in front of you or 2 interviews, it's not just 2, didn't get it, should have, didn't get it, should have. Now it's 2, it's like, let me rise to it, let me get there, let me pull this off. I know I can do this. I know capability-wise I can do it. I've just been scared to do it. Now is the moment. If I'm in chaos anyway, let me use this productively. That to me is one of the biggest markers of high performers over time, is they're able to take moments of adversity and actually raise what they do and where they go into a whole new place. That's the magic, okay? So I challenge you to do that, okay? Own the gap period, right? Create a sense of momentum, and then set a higher target, up the bar. I hope this has been helpful, guys. I'll talk to you soon. And do, for more videos, for more content, to go deeper down the rabbit hole of what I do, what I teach, and the unique way I kind of affect change for people who are at a fork in the road, helloanish.com. That's my website, HELLOANISH.com. Hop over there. I've got videos, I've got content, I've got things that are going to help you right now. Enough from me. Go do great things. I will talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.